Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Before starting the video, please subscribe and keep watching for more details videos. MTG Point Coco Gauff falls to Xinyu Wang in straight set shakedown. The sun was low over the court in Berlin, casting long shadows across the baseline, as if the earth itself knew this was not going to be any ordinary match. The scent of fresh clay hung in the air, blending with tension and anticipation as two athletes stepped onto the court. One a rising titan, the other a poised predator with something to prove. Coco Gauff, reigning US Open champion and World No. 2, was all rhythm and electricity, every step echoing the promise of youth and fire. Opposite her stood Xinyu Wang, a quiet force in tennis, often underestimated, often overlooked. Until now. This was not a final, not a grand slam, not even a match many circled where the draw came out. But by the time the second set closed, it had become something mythic, the moment the storm was caught by the silence. The calm before. Gauff arrived in Berlin with momentum. Her training had been meticulous, her form fluid. The press ran highlights of her forehand winners, her slice serves, her insatiable energy. She was, by every measure, expected to cruise past Wang, perhaps in 2 quick sets. Xinyu Wang, on the other hand, had come in under the radar. Ranked outside the top 30, she had a quiet 2025 season. Steady, modest, without the sparkle of headlines. She had slipped into the quarterfinal unnoticed by many, but feared by those who'd faced her calm, unblinking backhand. In the locker room, Coco hummed of herself, lacing her shoes with the practiced ease of someone who has done this 100 times. Wang sat across the aisle, eyes closed, barely moving, her breath deep and even. There was no tension in her body, only the stillness of someone listening closely to something invisible. First set, the unraveling. From the first point, something was off. Gauff's usual pop on the serve lacked bite. Her footwork seemed hurried. Uncharacteristic errors crept in like whispers. Meanwhile, Wang moved like water, absorbing, redirecting, never forcing. The scoreboard ticked along methodically, 6-4 to Wang. No fist pumps, no screams, just a quiet nod as she walked back to her seat. The crowd, expecting fire, had received fog, and it unnerved them. Gauff looked up at her box, her coach gesturing small corrections. Nothing drastic. But her eyes betrayed confusion. She wasn't being out-hit. She was being out-thought. She's slowing everything down, Gauff said under her breath during the changeover. And that was it. The genius of Wang's game that day wasn't power. It was poetry. She didn't play to Coco's rhythm. She rewrote it. Points became lullabies. Rally after rally, Gauff's aggression sank in molasses. Second set, the shakedown. The phrase shakedown doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it means a test, a breaking apart to see what still holds. And by the second set, Wang was shaking Gauff's game to its very foundation. Wang started hitting drop shots. Soft, slight things that barely made it over the net, inviting Gauff forward, only to pass her with surgical precision. She lobbed when Gauff rushed, punished second serves, and returned with eerie consistency. She didn't just outplay Gauff. She exposed her. 3-0, then 4-1. Every ball Gauff missed, she stared at her strings, searching for cracks. But the real fracture was internal. Doubt. At 5-2, match point, Wang stood still. The crowd, sensing history, if not in scale, then in spirit, held their breath. Gauff tossed the ball high, swung hard, and sent it long. Game. Set. Match. Wang. The applause was stunned, hesitant at first, then full-bodied. Not for a favorite fallen, but for a challenger who arrived. Aftermath. At the press conference, Gauff was gracious, if subdued. She played smarter than I did. I rushed. I didn't adapt. She deserved that win. No excuses. No injury claims. Just honesty. That, too, is the mark of a champion. Wang, ever composed, offered little flair. I focused on each point, nothing else. But behind that modesty was steel. She had studied Gauff. She had known the pressure Coco carried with her top ranking, her titles, her endorsements. Wang didn't attack the person. She simply dismantled the patterns, the bigger picture. Losses like this don't break players. They build legends. If Gauff's career is a book, this match is not the ending of a chapter, but a footnote in a much longer story. A reminder that greatness isn't about never falling. It's about standing up, brushing off the clay and coming back sharper. For Wang, this was a page-turner, a name now etched in memory. Tennis fans will say, that match in Berlin, Wang versus Gauff, that's when we knew. And maybe one day, when the rankings shift again and titles pass hands like heirlooms, this moment will shine even brighter, not just as an upset, but as an awakening. Final thoughts. In tennis, match point is not just a score. It's a crossroads, a collision of will, endurance, fear, and resolve. On that day in Berlin, Coco Gauff reached a match point and lost. But the real match point, it wasn't in the final game. It was in the lesson. Even the brightest stars sometimes need a shadow to remind them how to shine. And in Xinyu Wang's quiet, ruthless precision, we found the perfect shadow. It was a sun-drenched afternoon, but the heat on the court had little to do with the temperature. At center stage stood Coco Gauff, America's darling of tennis, confident, powerful, and carrying the weight of a country's expectation. Across the net, poised and quietly focused, was China's rising force, Xinyu Wang, with a racket that spoke louder than her reserved demeanor ever could. And in a stunning, unflinching display, it was Wang who walked away with the upset. A star dims, another rises. The scoreboard flashed its final verdict. 6-4, 6-3. A straight-set victory for the 23-year-old Wang, who controlled the tempo, dominated the rallies, and disrupted every rhythm Gauff tried to establish. For Coco Gauff, who had surged into the spotlight with her U.S. Open win and a dominant 2024 season, the loss was more than just unexpected. It was a crack in what many saw as an armor of inevitable greatness. But tennis isn't about inevitability. It's about the present moment. And Wang owned every moment. The anatomy of the upset. From the first ball, it was clear this match wouldn't unfold by script. Wang's strategy was simple. Deny Gauff her forehand rhythm, force her wide, and pounce on short balls. With a surprisingly aggressive return game and baseline depth that pinned Gauff behind the court, Wang turned defense into offense again and again. Where Gauff's game thrives on momentum, energy, and confidence, Wang's approach was a lesson in disruption. She absorbed Gauff's power with finesse and redirected it like a veteran. Cross-court backhands painted lines, forehand flicks found corners, and her serve, never flashy, was clinical, giving Gauff few looks to attack. Gauff had flashes, she always does. A stunning cross-court winner here, a fist-pump-worthy passing shot there. But Wang didn't blink. She returned fire with fire. More than a loss. This wasn't just a loss for Gauff. It was a reminder. The mountain she's climbing is crowded. Every year, the summit gets more competitive. And Wang, who has steadily climbed the rankings with little fanfare, just planted a flag of her own. Credit to her. Gauff said post-match, her voice calm, but the sting evident in her eyes. She played clean, smart tennis. I didn't find my game early enough. Sometimes the better player just wins. That was today. Gauff spoke like a pro, and she is one. At only 21, she's already a Grand Slam champion, an Olympic hopeful, and a voice beyond sport. But she's also still growing, evolving, learning. Days like these remind us, greatness is a journey, not a status. Who is Xinyu Wang? For those not paying attention, Wang's victory might seem like a shock, but for those watching closely, it's the result of years of quiet, tireless work. Wang Xinyu turned pro at just 15, touted as part of China's golden generation of tennis. But while peers like Zheng Qinwen got more media shine, Wang chose to let her racket do the talking. In 2024, she made a quiet charge into the top 30. In 2025, she's now playing like she belongs in the top 10. Her game isn't flashy, but it's smart, balanced, deceptively powerful, and most importantly, mentally anchored. On the court, she read situations like a chess player. Against Gauff, she knew what to expect. Speed, aggression, crowd energy. So she brought silence, stillness, precision. It worked.